Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. We'll be getting started very shortly. We'll just let a few of you trickle in. While we are waiting for everyone to join, please consider muting your notifications. You might get a little loud. The screen here will show you how you can do that, and you are welcome to have your camera on or off, whatever you feel comfortable with. Please utilize the chat and the Q&A throughout. We'll be keeping an eye on those for any questions and to keep you connected. As we are waiting to get started, I'll introduce myself. I am Christina Kofa. I serve as the Assistant Director for Community Engagement at the University of Northern Iowa, as well as the Director of our Nonprofit Leadership Alliance Student Association. And I am on the Executive Committee of the Association of CNPs and serve as our Vice President. Again, while we wait for you to all get settled in, a few housekeeping items. We invite you to keep those combos going in the chat. I keep seeing those pop up, so I love that. And please make sure that you are posting your Q&As or your questions in that Q&A section so we don't miss them on accident. Again, you might want to mute your Microsoft Teams notifications. They can get a little overwhelming. And again, your mics are disabled until the Q&A session, but meantime, if you'd like to have your camera on, please do so. A few announcements as well. Our next certified nonprofit professional cohort begins on September 14th of this year. If you're ready to take that next step, you'll find some more info in the chat. And today's session is brought to you by the Association of CNPs, our professional organization of certified nonprofit professionals. One way that the association supports its membership is by hosting sessions on topics that are on the minds of our nonprofit professionals and our CNP learners. These events are always free, but if you would like to support the Alliance to continue these free webinars, again, check the chat. We've dropped a link for ways that you can donate, and thank you for your support. Help us to continue to keep offering this free education. You can also text NLA to 70707 in the chat. Don't listen to me. Today, our speaker is Abby Jarvis. And before we dive in, here's a little bit more about Abby. She is a researcher, writer, and speaker at Neon One. The nonprofit technology industry is where she has spent 14 years of her career. Abby is dedicated to understanding how and why donors support their favorite causes, studying donor trends and behaviors, and sharing practical tactics nonprofits can use to build successful fundraising programs. We hope you all enjoyed today's session. Abby, I'll let you take it away.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, guys, I'm so excited to talk to you about all of this. Recurring donors are some of my favorite nonprofit supporters out there, and I am absolutely tickled to death that I get to talk to you about them a little bit. So I'm not going to spend much time dwelling here. I will tell you that my background is not actually in research. So my goal is to share a lot of data with you today, but to make it really easy to understand and hopefully even really exciting, which is not a term I ever thought I would apply to graphs like the ones I'm going to show you. Can you do me a favor and just let me know in the chat that you can see my slides, and then I will move on. All right. Okay. Heck yeah. All right. So before we really get into recurring donors and why they're so amazing, I want to give you a little bit of context about what's going on in the sector, some of the headwinds that we're kind of collectively facing together, and then this will give us a really beautiful backdrop that will make us even more appreciative of the people we're here to talk about. So how many of you, let me know in the chat, are familiar with the Fundraising Effectiveness Project? I'm always very interested. This is a really, really valuable opportunity or resource for you who are trying to keep up on what's going on with the sector. Okay, I got a couple new ones. Okay, so for those of you who are not familiar with the Fundraising Effectiveness Project, uh, I say we, are a group of folks, data providers, like Neon One and a bunch of other fundraising platforms in the sector, and we all share our data with each other and with the Fundraising Effectiveness Project. The Fundraising Effectiveness Project is managed by Giving Tuesday and the Association of Fundraising Professionals. And you can kind of think of the quarterly reports that you'll hear me refer to it as FEP. You'll hear us kind of refer to the FEP reports as a report card for how the sector has done in the past quarter. So at the end of the year, every year, we kind of all share our data and we do an analysis of what's gone on. And this is what happened in 2025. So the first thing we saw in 2025, and I'm going to start with the good news, is that the number of dollars, pure number, donated to nonprofits went up 5%. This is from 2024 to 2025. We love to see growth here. When dollars go up, the more work nonprofits are able to do in their communities. That's the good news. The bad news is that that money is coming from fewer and fewer people. So even though dollars went up in 2025, the number of people donating those dollars went down. So the number of active donors in the average nonprofits database, and we looked at thousands of nonprofits, shrank around 4%. So this means that nonprofits are increasingly relying on a smaller pool of people for a larger portion of their revenue. Another thing that is interesting is that nonprofits' donor retention rates stayed relatively flat. And I could spend a lot of time just talking about that in particular, but we're not necessarily losing a lot of active donors, but we're having a hard time finding new ones. So this is kind of an interesting backdrop for some of the recurring giving stuff that we're going to talk about. Interestingly, where we see a lot of people disengaging from nonprofits, we see growth in major and supersized donors. So these are the folks who are giving greater than $5,000 a year. We saw the most growth in supersized donors. So that's people donating $50,000 or more a year. But we see the biggest losses in the micro donors, small donors, and mid-sized donor cohorts. The reason that this is something that we should be keeping an eye on is because even though most of the funding comes from major and supersized donors, the vast majority of donors in the United States are giving between $1 a year and $5,000 a year. So we see this erosion, and I don't love the donor pyramid for a lot of reasons. But we're seeing erosion in the base of the donor pyramid, and we don't want to have that because the base of the donor pyramid eventually feeds the top of the donor pyramid. We see similar patterns in retention. We saw that retention rates for supersized donors, went up, but it declined for donors of almost every other size. So not only are we not attracting small donors, or I call them everyday donors. Small sounds like I'm being dismissive of their contributions, and that we shouldn't. So we're seeing not only that we're not acquiring small donors, we're losing the ones that are actively in our databases. This is obviously not sustainable. And I'm not telling you to bum you out. I'm telling you this because it's going to give us some important context for some of the next steps that we're going to talk about. We just had the Q1 2026 FEP report come out, and we are seeing some encouraging signs here. I won't get too into the methodology because I don't know how many of you are data nerds like I am, but this compares activity from Q1 2026 to Q1 2025. And we're seeing a decline in individual donors giving, an increase in dollars, and flat retention. So these patterns are kind of staying consistent across the board. Okay, so to recap, dollars are up, but donors are down. And retention, even though it's staying kind of flat, is not great. The average retention rate for nonprofits right now is 18%. And we know that if we want to build sustainable fundraising programs, keeping people engaged is important. And 18% is not a particularly sustainable figure. All right, that's the bad news. Let's talk about the good news. The good news is that there's a really remarkable group of people that are bucking these trends. So this information does not come from the Fundraising Effectiveness Project. These two graphs come from some research that Neon One published in April. And what we did is we looked at the average donor bases of around 4,000 nonprofits to figure out what's going on. So from 2023 to 2025, we saw a decline in individual donors of around 5.5%. So you can see it's kind of dipped a little bit from 2023 to 2025. Again, this is not super surprising. This mirrors what we just saw in the FEP report. But what's cool is we saw an increase in the number of people who are choosing to make recurring donations. So we saw an almost 32% increase here. Now, the last time I shared similar findings with someone, someone told me in the chat of that webinar that she saw this increase and she felt, and the quote from her was guilt and shame, because she felt like she wasn't seeing the growth in her own recurring giving program that others were experiencing. So if you are on this call and you're listening to me share that there was a 32% growth in recurring donors from 2023 to 2025, and you feel bad because you don't think that your own performance is mirroring that, I want to draw your attention to the numbers on the left side of this, or left side of this graph. In 2023, the average nonprofit in this data set had 19 recurring donors, and that grew 32% to 25 in 2025. I don't want to downplay the significance of a 32% increase here. What I am trying to achieve in telling you this is that if you feel behind, you're probably not. We're seeing really remarkable growth, and that's a signal of huge potential here, but this is still something that is in its infancy. A lot of nonprofits are not pursuing recurring giving programs right now, and I hope that the data and the insights that I'm going to show you encourage you to do so. Do me a favor and drop in the chat if you are actively running a recurring giving program, if you're considering it, if you're trying to get your board to think about it. Let me know where you are in this process, and I'll kind of adjust what I talk about accordingly. The other thing that I think is really encouraging is this. So we saw when we look at donation revenue in the same time. So the previous slide was donors. This is revenue. We saw that donation revenue stayed flat from 2023 to 2025. It dipped a little bit in 2024. It went back up. It only grew 1.5% over these 3 years. Not terrible, but not what we want to see. Revenue from recurring donations, though, increased 36%. What's encouraging about this to me is that here we see that the number of people increased 32%, but their contributions increased 36%. And this tells us, and I'm going to get more into it in a minute, that people who are in this 32% growth are growing their giving over time. They're not staying static. All right, let's go back over here. Okay, I see some folks where we have one, we need to be promoting it more. We're actively running one. We're starting one soon. Okay, we got a good mix. Good. Okay, so for those of you who are just getting started and those of you who are considering getting started, I want to share this. And if you haven't started one at all, this is going to be especially important for you. I have long said that recurring donors are a fundraiser's best friend, and this is why. This slide right here. So, one of the objections I encounter frequently when I'm talking about building a recurring giving program is, well, Abby, I know that donors who give on a recurring basis tend to give less every year. Am I going to be cannibalizing my annual fundraising by emphasizing this group of donors that gives less every year and de-emphasizing this group of donors that gives much more? Here's how this breaks out. Yes, as a general rule, people who make one-off gifts give more on an annual basis than people who create recurring donations. That is true. When we look just at we take a snapshot of what people were doing over these 3 years, the average one-off or one-time donor gave a little over $2,000 a year in charitable donations. People who donated on a recurring basis gave less than $1,000 a year. Where the value for this group really shows up is when you pull back from the 1 year kind of overview, and then you look at things from a broader, higher level view. So yes, one-time donors give more every year, but their retention rates are relatively low. They stick around at a rate of around 32%, and they stay engaged for a little under 2 years. When we do the math, we see that just from this snapshot, the average donor lifetime value, and I hate using that phrase, but it's the only one I have, is around $3,600. Recurring donors, on the other hand, have very high retention rates. They stay engaged around 79%. That number actually goes up for some types of organizations. They stay engaged for around 8 years. And when we do the math, we find that their average donor lifetime value is over $7,000. So yes, one-time donors give more every year, but recurring donors give around twice their counterparts over the length of their lifetime. So if you are looking for a quick hit, got to hit that fundraising number at the end of the year, you may feel dissuaded from engaging this group of donors here. But as you are looking to build a sustainable, predictable, reliable source of income for your nonprofit, recurring donors are going to offer you a level of stability that we really don't see anywhere else in any other group of donors. So I think this is really important. The other thing that's even cooler, and I alluded to it a minute ago, was that this group of donors tend not only to give $938 a year static, they tend to increase their giving. They stay engaged for a long period of time, and they tend to increase their annual giving more rapidly over time than people who make one-time gifts. So I'm going to give you a little bit of context for this, and then I'm going to tell you a story that shows up in this chart. So in 2025, we published a study of the giving behaviors of around 100,000 donors. And we found that, again, the longer people stay engaged with nonprofits, the more they grow their giving over time. That 100,000 group of people, our panel, set this benchmark. So this is the growth curve for their annual giving over time. This dark blue line is how recurring donors grow their giving over time. And I want to draw attention to an anomaly in this graph. This decline here looks bad. It looks like people started giving really high here and then decreased their giving over time before starting to take off again in year 3. But let me tell you what happened. So in 2020, something happened. We had a pandemic, and the need for nonprofits just increased. The demand for their services increased, and the need for funding for those nonprofits increased. And recurring donors did something absolutely beautiful in 2020. They increased their giving so much that they flipped that trend that we just talked about. Most times, recurring donors give less than their one-time donors. In 2020, that pattern flipped. Recurring givers increased their giving so dramatically that they inverted that trend. And when they returned to normal giving levels, they decreased their annual giving. But it wasn't really a dramatic decrease. It was a return to normal after an unbelievable display of generosity during a period where nonprofits really needed their help. So don't be discouraged by this decline here. This decline is actually the tail end of a beautiful story. And that story is that a small and very dedicated group of people increased their giving so much that they are skewing my research even 6 years later. I think that's beautiful. We also know just from other past research that we've done that recurring donors are not just donors. They also make pledges. They purchase memberships. If you are running a membership program, they register for events. They raise money on behalf of their favorite organizations. They volunteer. And the thing that is even more beautiful about this group of people is that these are only the data points that I can see in our system. We're a CRM, and you can log things like donations and volunteer hours and peer-to-peer participation in a CRM. What you can't log in a CRM is all the other ways that this group of people shows their generosity for the nonprofits that they support. You can't put in a CRM that someone is advocating for your nonprofit at the dinner table. You can't put in a CRM that they signal boost your social media presence by engaging with your work. You can't see them referring people to your programs or inviting their friends to events or just spreading the word about your organization. This is an incredibly dedicated, passionate group of people that can have an unbelievable impact on the nonprofits that they love. And now is the perfect time for you to invest in building a program like this because you will start reaping the benefits immediately and you will do so for years and years and years to come. This is all great. I showed you a lot of graphs. I feel like we've kind of made the case for expanding or focusing on a recurring giving program. This then begs the question, though, who are these people and how do you start reaching them? So let's talk about who they are. It's really important to me that you trust what I'm about to tell you. So I want to give you a little bit of background about how I got the insights that I'm about to show you. So we did a survey in February of just over 2,000 people. And in that survey, we asked people to indicate whether or not they have a history of making recurring donations. And we did specify that it needed to be a true recurring donation. So it's automated, that payment is automatically made. If someone went and they visited a donation form and they made repeated one-time gifts, they would not be included in this group. Of that 2,000 people, 718 of them indicated that they had a history of making recurring gifts. You'll notice I'm using the word recurring and not monthly, and that's because I'm being pedantic. The way we phrased the question itself, it could have included payments other than monthly. So the vast majority of these gifts are monthly, but there are some people that set them up like biweekly or quarterly, and they also would be included here. So here's what this group of recurring donors shared about us. One of the things we asked, how old are you? One of the things I was delighted to see is that donors of all ages indicated that they have a history of making recurring gifts. If someone was under the age of 18, I can't see that. We only allow adults to answer these. So it is a distinct possibility that there are people making recurring gifts who are under the age of 18. I just don't have them. 18 to 24-year-olds were the smallest group. That's not super surprising. I don't know a lot of 20-year-olds that are sitting around taking surveys online, but we know that they're in here. The next smallest group were people over the age of 65. But as a general rule, the vast majority of people who have a history of making recurring gifts are what I call established adults. They're between the ages of 25 and 64. They're probably in the workplace. They've probably got their adult life more or less settled. Point of clarification, I'm not asking you to do anything wild like build segmentation lists based on your donors' ages. You don't need to worry about that. All we're doing here is painting a picture of the kind of person who is most likely to make this gift. That is something I would like you to keep in mind as I cover the data on this slide, which is around their household income. We asked people about their household income. I am again delighted to report that people from all income brackets have a history or are represented in our panel of recurring donors. I will say if we calculate this from the baseline, and I won't bore you with how we did this, I will tell you that donors who make between $75,000 and $150,000 a year are most likely to make recurring gifts. Again, I'm not telling you to build segmentation lists based on your donors' income levels. I am telling you that people who make this kind of gift tend to be well-established results or adults, probably in the workforce, looking for orgs to support. We also know that most of these folks are, again, those everyday donors. We found that around 95% of them gave less than $5,000 annually. This is especially important when you think back to that FEP data that I showed you at the beginning that shows that the groups that are overwhelmingly disengaging from supporting traditional nonprofits are folks who are everyday donors. As we as a sector look for ways to engage those everyday donors, again, to mitigate the risk of being over-reliant on major donors, engaging these everyday donors is going to be important, and this is a popular way to do that. I almost considered, for brevity's sake, leaving off the second graph, but we did find that almost, well, I won't quite say almost 60%, although I guess that's technically not wrong. 56.9% of our recurring donor panel said that they had supported multiple organizations in the last 12 months. The reason I put this up here is because of a common fear I encounter when I'm talking to nonprofits, just about fundraising in general. there is a perception, and it is an understandable one, that when you are raising money, you are competing with the nonprofit down the street for a piece of a finite pie. And I want to share with you this little glimpse at the truth that that's not true. It may feel true, but you are probably not competing with the nonprofit down the street. There's a lot of data behind this. I can talk to you about it later, but we've done research in the past that shows that people who give to multiple organizations in the same year give very generously and increase their giving over time more rapidly than those who support one time. So I show you this not because it really is actionable, but because I want to make you feel good about the fact that people who are choosing to make recurring gifts are very generous people, and they extend that generosity to a lot of folks. So I hope you feel like you don't have to compete as hard as you might otherwise think. So bring it all around. People who are on our recurring donor panel tend to be established adults. They're everyday donors. They're open to supporting multiple organizations. They're very accessible people. And I hope that when you send your next appeal, or as you start building your recurring giving program, just remember it's everyday folks like you and me who are going to be responding to you. And keeping things like that in mind always takes some of the fear for me away from sending big emails and communications. I hope that helps you too. Okay, so that's who they are. What keeps them engaged? Oh no, I'm missing some slides. This is not what I'm hoping for. Okay, that's fine. Well, we're going to keep going. Boop, presenter view, and I will make sure we get this all settled. Anyway, so what keeps them engaged with nonprofits? Let's see. All right, we know that nonprofits, when they do a good job of communicating with their supporters, tend to keep these folks engaged for a long period of time. I'm sorry, I'm a little thrown off by the missing slides. I'm just going to share, we're going to go off script a little bit. We asked these folks what motivated them to get involved, and then what keeps them involved in the long term. This group, because they do tend to have retention rates that are quite far. Thank you, Jalissa. We do know that this group does tend to have very high donor retention rates, and the things that keep them engaged very frequently mirror the things that inspired them to give in the first place. Here's where I'm going to go off script. So this graph shows us why these donors stay engaged with a nonprofit. What this is missing is the corresponding slide that talked about what motivated them to give in the first place. The reason I am not totally off the rails right now is because, somewhat predictably, the things that inspire a donor to give also tend to be the things that inspire them to stay engaged. So look at the top reasons that donors in this group stay engaged with a nonprofit. They feel connected to the work or mission. That was the number one reason that people got engaged here at all. The other two things that are just right neck and neck with each other is they understand their impact, and they think that their money was used wisely. This is brilliant. And these three statistics here paint a picture of your donors. So one thing that is making me sad right now is that my favorite graph in this whole slide is missing right now. And the favorite slide says that 60% of recurring donors created their gift without being asked to do so. 60% of these people are making an ongoing commitment to their favorite cause or nonprofit without being asked by anybody. Only 25% of this group of people said that they set up a recurring gift as a response to an appeal from a nonprofit. So when we saw that, we asked them, amazing, what on earth prompted you to do this? If you're not being asked, what made you give? And the answers that they gave us are that, one, we see a nonprofit in the community doing work that is important to us. They saw a nonprofit doing something in their community, making a tangible impact, and they sought out that nonprofit and elected to make a recurring gift without being invited to do so. that motivation, that passion carries over into the things that keep them involved for a long period of time. If you maintain that connection with people, they will stay engaged with you. If you show them the impact that they make, the same impact that they saw you making in your community, and you tell them, hey, your gift made that possible, here's how we used it, you will meet the psychological needs here that are inspiring people to stay involved. Something else that I think is really beautiful, and I wish I had had more questions to ask this group, is that they said that the support that they gave is an important part of their identity. I think that that is really interesting, especially because on that mysterious missing slide, they tell us that for many of them, making this gift is helping them fill a religious or moral obligation. So, what we see is a group of people who see nonprofits doing important work, decide they wanted to get involved, and did so at least in part because they felt an obligation to do so. If you acknowledge those motivators, if you acknowledge that they feel like they are connected to your work and they want to be a part of it, and you take steps to tie them to your work and your community, you're going to keep them engaged. If you meet that need, if they want to make a difference in their community and you say, amazing, look at the difference that you've made. You gave us X amount of dollars, that X amount of dollars turned into this impact. Thank you for your support. You're going to fill those two psychological needs that got them involved and will keep them involved. And when you make little nods to their identity, if you acknowledge that they're generous, if you acknowledge that they're passionate about your cause, you're going to keep them engaged. So I hope that this encourages you. This is a group of people who are not giving because of tax benefits. They're not giving out of a sense of peer pressure. They're not giving out of a sense, I mean, for some of them, it is like a financial choice, but the vast majority of these folks are giving because they care about you and they care about your work and they want to support the impact that you are making in your community. And as you communicate with them, whether you're creating appeals or whether you are sending impact updates, I hope that that is encouraging to you and that it informs your messaging. Okay, so why don't they stay? This is equally as important to understand. I'm going to come back to the main reason in a minute. They no longer felt connected to the work or mission. They didn't think their money was used wisely. They didn't understand their impact. It's the opposites of the things that keep them engaged. If you are sending communications that reaffirm their commitment to your cause and show them the difference they're making, they are much more likely to stay engaged if they can afford it. By far the most significant reason that contributed to people choosing to cancel their recurring gift is they could no longer afford it. And I want to talk about that for a second. I know a few of you have said that you are starting a recurring giving program or that you have one and it is small and kind of inactive. When that happens, it can feel like a personal failing when you lose a donor. And I want you to hear me. If you are like me, losing someone can feel very personal and it can hurt and it can kind of take away your confidence, especially if you're just getting started. So I want you to hear me when I say that if you are sending communications that meet these needs, if you are tying them more closely to your mission and to the impact that they're making, and they still cancel their gift or let it lapse, it is probably not your fault. What you can take some steps to mitigate the risk of that happening. Some common things that you can do, you can give people the ability to downgrade their gift a little bit. If they're feeling a financial squeeze, they may want to pull back on their monthly commitment. You can even give them the option to pause a recurring payment until their circumstances change and then reinstate it. And even if they choose not to do that, even if they absolutely have to cancel, there are some steps that you can take to increase the likelihood that they continue their support again when their circumstances change. You can continue sending them emails, you can continue sending them newsletters, you can continue connecting with them at events. The fact that they are ceasing their support because they can't give means that they are probably still deeply invested in your work and will want to continue that. So do everything you can to maintain your connection with that person. The fact that their payment status has changed is not indicative of the fact that their love for your work has changed. Do what you can to keep that alive. So one of the things that we do want to make sure we do with this group of donors is communicate with them. And this is exceptionally important because of something kind of common that I encounter when I talk about recurring donors. I had a conversation with a woman recently who said that she uses her recurring donor list as an exclusion list for just regular emails that her organization sends out. She says, if I communicate with my recurring donors too much, they will remember that they have set up a recurring gift and they will cancel that gift. Please don't do that. We asked recurring donors what they wanted from the nonprofits they support, and this is what they told us. Of course, people want their donation receipt. I am kind of amused at the fact that of our 718 recurring donors, only 360 of them said that they expect a receipt every time. That just makes me laugh because this is something that I just assume that everyone wants all of the time, but that's why we do research, because we make assumptions and they're not necessarily correct. Please do send donation receipts. I do actually recommend for those of you who are running this kind of program, if you can, go in and update your receipt every once in a while. I am a recurring donor to several organizations, and I do always open the receipts that they send me, but it does start to just become noise after a little while when I'm getting the same message over and over and over again. What I like even better is that a lot of these folks want regular communications about programs and news. And this is the kind of data point I wish I had had when I was having that conversation with the woman who says that she's afraid that communicating with her donors will remind them that they're giving and inspire them to cancel. These people are extremely passionate about your work and they want to know about what you're doing. They want to hear impact updates, they want newsletters, they want to talk to you. Mostly, they want to hear how their donation was used. They want that impact reporting. And on top of that, they want information about other ways to get involved. This is another thing that I encounter very frequently that a lot of folks are kind of reluctant to do. They are reluctant to invite their recurring donors to give again. We know there's a lot of data behind nonprofits getting additional one-time donations on top of recurring gifts. Just please talk to this group of people. Again, like I can't emphasize enough that this is one of the most engaged cohorts of donors you have, and talking to them will benefit you and make them happy. So please do so. So of all of the 718 people in our panel, this is the group that stays most engaged with nonprofits. They want to hear from you. And the people who choose to churn, or honestly don't choose to churn, tend to do so because of finances. So building something around pausing gifts or keeping folks engaged after their gift has lapsed will benefit you in the long run. All right, let's spend 5 minutes or so talking about how you can apply all of this to your work, and then we'll take some questions. So, oh, also, I'm keeping an eye on the chat, but if you have questions, try and drop them in the QA so we can make sure we get them. Okay, as you are doing acquisition, if you are one of those who is getting ready to start, or you're working on promoting this, or you're in charge of developing a monthly giving program, this is going to sound very silly, but I want you to hear me when I say, please just ask. You don't have to think about it too much. Share your work, share the impact, talk about the fact that that work and impact is possible because of recurring donors, and then invite people to get in on the fun. And I say fun, and I mean it, because this should be fun. The other big thing is that when you invite people to get in on the fun, please make it easy to act. It happens less and less, but I do frequently see people talking about amazing, cool stuff that their recurring donors are doing, and then there's no link to the donation form. And that can be a real bummer. As you are doing so, work on being visible on multiple online channels. So you do want to be visible, of course, in email and on your website, but you also want to talk about this on social media where you will reach new people. Be visible online and be visible in your community if you can. If you've got community events in Lakeland, we have First Fridays. I've encountered all kinds of cool nonprofits organizations there. Talk with people at your Chamber of Commerce and attend those events. Go to networking events. I'm sorry if you're introverted, I know the struggle, but being visible in your community is one of the most powerful ways to start building some momentum around your recurring giving program. This is another thing that I hope you hear. Ask for this type of gift very regularly. This doesn't have to be a formal ask. This doesn't mean you have to send a standalone donation appeal. This doesn't mean you have to put together hard asks for social media. Asking can be something as simple as sharing a cool impact update in your newsletter and inviting people to learn more about your recurring giving program. Just get used to talking about it. Get people thinking about it. And I say this because of 2 data points that we cover in the report, which I'll make sure you get. We asked if these folks prefer to give at a certain time of year, and 77% of them said they have no preference around when they give. This is another topic I could talk about a lot, but asking more frequently can unlock a lot of additional donations, particularly from this group. So just get used to sharing information about your recurring giving program and inviting people to join. The other thing that I like that kind of supports this. No preference on when they give is such good news. Stephanie, I could do a whole webinar on why this is important. There's a lot we could unpack here. The other thing that I would encourage you to do, and the reason I say to ask regularly, is because people plan their giving much more frequently if they are making recurring gifts. So the first time you ask, maybe even the first several times you ask, you may not get that gift. If you send an appeal and you don't see a lot of traction at first, don't worry. This group is very deliberate about their giving. They are making a commitment to you, and they frequently need to think about it for a little while. So as you ask, and as you ask regularly, you're planting that seed, you're helping people make the decision to get involved, and then you are finally giving them the opportunity to do so. This group also does tend to research. So the more you can do to build trust on your website, on your social channels, anywhere else, that will benefit you. A lot of them are honestly looking at social media and your website to understand what you do, the impact that you have, and the difference they will be able to make with their gift. Some folks do go to third-party sites like GuideStar or Charity Navigator to check you out. Some folks will look at your 990s. So anything you can do to establish transparency and trust online will benefit you just in general, but especially with this group of people. They do have high retention rates, but that retention rate doesn't just happen on its own. This group does require some stewardship, especially if you want to get to the point that we looked at the beginning of the session where people are growing their giving over time. Affordability is the #1 reason that this group of supporters will churn. That is not entirely within the realm of your control, but you can take a couple of steps to preserve that relationship. Give people the opportunity to pause their gifts if they need to, give them other ways to stay involved with your work. Just simply stay in touch and invite them when the time is right to rejoin you by making another gift, volunteering, going to events, however you want to engage this group of people. The upside of the fact that affordability is the #1 reason for churn is that that's not within your control, but all of the other reasons that these donors churn are in your control. If you are reinforcing folks' connections to your cause, if you are telling them the impact that they're going to make, if you're keeping them up to date on how you've used their money and the way the community is benefiting from their support, you are going to be meeting a lot of the expectations or addressing a lot of the motivators that inspired them to give in the first place. And that's really special. And for those of you who are in marketing and you are kind of combining marketing and fundraising, this is beautiful. It does double duty for you. If you're talking on social media or in emails or whatever about impact and community engagement and showing people the results of their support, you're doing the thing that will keep people engaged and help you find new supporters. And if you are in content marketing or marketing at all, something being able to do that kind of double duty is absolutely remarkable. I will make sure that I get you the slide deck with all of the slides in it. Thank you for being gracious with me as I've had to riff on the ones that I had. But the big thing I want you to take away from this is that people in your community right now are willing and able to make recurring donations. We see that over 8 years of data. This most recent study, 3 years of data, but long term, over 8 years. This is an increasingly popular way that people choose to support their favorite causes. They are a passionate group of people. They are going to be your biggest champions, and they are out there not being asked. Ask them. Let them show you how much they care and let them show you how passionate they can be in supporting your work. If you're interested in kind of digging into a lot of the data that I shared today, this is where you can download the report. It does, of course, really dive deep into recurring donors, but it also includes benchmarks for small, mid-size, and large nonprofits kind of broken out. So if you're just getting started, you can check out like the small nonprofits. If you're really building something big, you can check out and see what the more major players are doing. Okay, I do see one question that I can answer right now. Renee asked, what is the best way to prepare roller derby skaters to help fundraise? A majority of them just want to skate, but everyone is expected to help the organization beyond skating. I would tell you to try two things. One is have a relatively low cost way for them to donate online. So if you ask them for a $20 gift, like that feels pretty reasonable. The other thing I would tell you to do, especially if they are oriented towards skating and not necessarily toward fundraising, I would tell you to think about what their monthly or ongoing gift would cover and tell them that. Do you have to pay venue fees for your meets? Do you have insurance that you have to pay? Do you pay for equipment? Do you have to pay for staff time to organize things? Tell them what they are paying for. The thing that is really interesting about your particular circumstance is that this is a situation where someone is getting something already, so it changes the relationship dynamic a little bit. You're not asking your skaters to donate because you are necessarily, maybe I might be wrong, doing a lot of community service or feeding people. There's not that, these are folks that are participating in an active activity. And so the expectations change a little bit. So ask them for an amount, you decide what that is, and then tell them why that is important and how they will benefit from making that gift. The other thing you could honestly try to do, and this isn't even related to recurring giving, this is something else, but what you could do is you could ask your roller derby participants to raise money on your behalf. You could do a peer-to-peer fundraising event. I'm not sure if you've ever kind of run that kind of event, but what you would do is each skater would set up a fundraising page of their own. They would share it with friends and family. They would ask for donations on your behalf. And that is a really common fundraising tactic for folks who are running this kind of, I mean, I don't know if you would consider it a sports league. That's the closest thing I can think of. So I would try those two things. Ask them for an ongoing gift and then make the case for what they're actually paying for, and then invite them to raise money on your behalf through a peer-to-peer fundraiser or something like that. All right, let me flip over. Ooh, we got some good questions. Does somebody want to field some of these questions for me so you don't have to listen to me read them out loud?
I am happy to do so.
Awesome. Thank you.
We have a question from sorry, we just had one from Monica. What are some feasible strategies for a small nonprofit who doesn't have dedicated fundraising staff?
Ooh, that is a good one. So I would look at the things that you're already doing. So do you have a social media presence? I would assume so. What I would do then is I would make sure that you have a recurring donation option enabled on your donation form. and then work sharing that into your social media calendar. A good rule of thumb for this is to spend about 80% of your social media posts adding value, so educating people, inspiring people, amusing people, and then 20% actually asking for donations. So put together a short little series of posts that link to your donation form. If you have any kind of marketing or communications outreach, maybe that's your ED sending those out, maybe it's a volunteer sending those out. You can find little opportunities to work recurring giving into your communications there. You could try sending a newsletter that spotlights your recurring giving program and inviting people to learn more about it. If you have a base of recurring donors already, you could spotlight even a recurring donor if they're comfortable doing that, and inviting them or inviting people to get involved that way. I would, instead of adding things to your calendar or to your workload, I would look for ways to work mentions of your recurring giving program into the things you are already doing before you start adding on to it. So I would start there.
Thank you. This one is a little bit of a combo of two different questions, one from me and then one from Felicia.
Okay.
So outside of main campaigns, i.e. Giving Tuesday, year-end events, etc., what are ways to keep recurring donors engaged? And I had a very similar question. How do you engage recurring donors versus those one-off and annual donors?
Totally. So some things that I've seen work really well are little things. So one, we didn't even have time to get into this. One of the like most effective tactics I see in recurring giving programs is having a named group. People love feeling like they're part of an in crowd, and just simply naming your group can make it feel like you're part of something special. An organization I see doing this really well is IPH, it's the Interfaith Partnership for the Homeless up in New York. Their recurring giving program is called the Key Club. And when they invite donors to give, they are inviting them to join the Key Club. And once you have this group, whether or not you give it a name, doing something as simple as sending a slightly modified version of your newsletter can be really engaging. So send them the same newsletter. You can, so the way you would do this, you would build lists. You'd have a list of your recurring donors and you'd have a list of the rest of your donors. You would send a version of your newsletter to just your general donor base using your recurring donor base as an exclusion list, and then vice versa. You would send a newsletter to your recurring list using your other list as a suppression list. And what that does, you're sending them the same information. You're not really adding a ton of extra work for yourself, but simply adding a sentence or two acknowledging the fact that they're an ongoing supporter and acknowledging the fact that they're part of this group of people who are all dedicated to working together is really important. It reinforces that sense of belonging. It reinforces that emotional connection to the cause and makes them feel like they're part of something special. And you can do that with very little extra work. Another thing that I've seen work really well, IPH does this. They'll have in their regularly scheduled social media posts a post that alludes to the Key Club and talks about something cool that has happened because of the Key Club's support. So I, when I talk about keeping folks engaged through email, on social media, on the website, whatever, I always see this little moment of hesitation. We're like, oh God, like that's just adding stuff to my communications calendar. I would encourage you at least to start. Don't add anything to your communications calendar. Just tweak it a little bit to appeal specifically to your recurring donors. And that can have a really outsized influence on what actually happens when they receive those communications without much work on your part.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good
Um,
one.
Another great question we have here is how do we change, from Kathy, is how do we change our management's corporate ideas? They only want to go for the large one-time donations, believing that a wealthier donor is the best type to have.
Ooh, Kathy. I'm so excited about this question. So yeah, I get it. I get where they're coming from. However, I would ask you to tell them two things. So the first thing, if they're corporate, I assume they will know what a pipeline is. When you are building your pipeline, if you're in marketing or sales or whatever, You cast a wide net, and then as the net kind of narrows, more and more people will funnel down to the bottom. And there's a reason for that. When you have that wide net, you're mitigating a lot of risk, but you're going to develop those relationships, and that pipeline should grow over time. It is very, very, very infrequent that someone enters a nonprofit pipeline as a major donor. I can tell you with certainty that there is not a major donor in your database that started by writing you a $10,000 check. That just doesn't happen. Most major donors have repeated engagements with a nonprofit at a lower giving level before they actually make a major gift. Those gifts are the result of long-term stewardship, not one-time outreach. So, if you want to build a major donor pipeline, you have to start by building a broad base of everyday donors. Otherwise, you are going to be overly dependent on a very small group of people for a large amount of money. And you are not, when those donors invariably churn or have to pull back on giving, or God forbid, pass away, you will have no one in the pipeline to take their place. The other thing that you can talk to them about is something called what is it called? The dependency quotient. And this is a risk mitigation thing. If you are in corporate and you've like, which is more sustainable, to have three major, huge clients or to have 300 smaller clients? If you have three major clients and one of your clients churns, you are hurting because you've lost a significant portion of your overall revenue. But if you have a base of 300 clients and you lose a client, that's not the end of the world because there are still 299 left. Do I like talking about donors this way? No, I don't. But if you're talking about building a pipeline or building a sustainable, reliable donor base to people who come from a corporate background, that's the language that they will understand. You're mitigating risk and you're building a major gifts pipeline, but you cannot do either of those things by overemphasizing large donors and neglecting the small donors. It just is not sustainable. I'm quite passionate about that topic. I could talk about that one for a long time.
Thank you so very much, Abby. It is time for us to get things wrapped up. We are very close to the end of our time together. And thank you, attendees, for your questions and for joining us today. As a reminder, the Association of CMPs hosts events like these throughout the year. And for more info, you can check in the chat for our upcoming events page. If you have any feedback from today's event, we do also have a survey that will be shared in the chat. If you would like to donate to help us continue these free sessions, please, again, check the chat. And the info from all of this will be available afterwards. So if you would like to show this to your corporate team or have questions relating back to anything, that information will be shared. Again, thank you, Abby, so very, very much. And feel free to leave a message in the chat with any of your takeaways from today.
Perfect. And I will, NLA folks, make sure I get the slide deck with all of the slides before you send that out.